to me, and it's why I sing your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. You father the orphan, your kindness makes us whole, and you shoulder our weakness, and your strength becomes our own. Now you're making me like you, clothing me in white, bringing beauty from ashes. For you will have your bride, free of all her guilt, and rid of all her shame, and known by her true name. And it's why I sing your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will
Testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 4, 4. Check 1, 2. Unmute.
It's why I sing your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips.
I see the sun waking up the morning, reviving dreams. I feel the
Good morning once again. I'm going to call everyone in from your muffins and coffee. You can bring them in. There is freedom to do so. As we all gather back in, I will just remind you that we have our AGM that's happening at 2 o'clock this afternoon. And so if you're tuning in as well, you can count on 2 o'clock is our time. And the conference booklets that you've received, the orange booklets, contain the reports. And so when we come to the part in the AGM when we're doing reports, we will not be reading those. Those are for your reading now. They're updates on the churches from our church reps. And in order to just have a bit more sharing, each of our church reps is going to share just something, a way that they are encouraged, the way that they've been seeing God work. And there will be an opportunity for some questions, but it's your responsibility to read those reports as they are presented, and so it just saves us a little bit more time as we proceed into the AGM this afternoon. So I have the privilege, once again, I'm so grateful to be part of the Prairie District Board, and that you've given me the opportunity to chair and to lead and help the district walk through some specific steps that we've been going through. I think we have a presentation that looks less good. There we go. It's much more plain. We wanted to cover this time as to where we're going as a district. With Rob's resignation happening last year, there was some question as to, well, now what? Now it brings, whenever there's that kind of change, now what are we going to do? And now it brings a sense of loss. But there was also questions around the table, even when Rob was there. Why do we exist as a district? What do we do as a district? Where are we going as a district? What's important to us as a district? These are all questions that relate to strategic planning. And so we contracted the services of Arrow Leadership in Langley, and they helped walk us through some of this, working out what is it that as we take steps into the future. And there's the consultant that we worked with talked about this reality. Well, some organizations and churches will do one of two things with the transition of a senior leader. They'll wait and they'll hold on, and they'll say the next senior leader will tell us what we're going to be about. Or the organization will say, let's figure out what we want to be about and where we want to go, and hire according to that strategic plan. And so we chose the latter to try and work this out, because as we are part of the Evangelical Free Church of Canada, we know that there's a grassroots component about us, that we are raising up the movement within ourselves and amongst ourselves. And so it was very much a collaborative effort. What I'd like to share with you is the results of that process and where we are going in terms of strategic planning and some goal setting for the coming year, so that you can have a sense of the movement that we will be going for in the coming months. So the next slide describes our purpose. And so with purpose, this really answers the question, why do we exist? Why does the Prairie District even exist? And there are a lot of answers around the table. Answers like, well, we exist to proclaim the gospel. We exist to do this and to do that. And in many cases, very high-minded, very biblical answers. But when we get right down to it, we're really trusting our churches to be the purveyors, the proclaimers of the gospel within their specific communities. The Prairie District we're a collection. We're a family of churches. And so we determined that we exist as a district to nurture the establishment or the beginning of churches, but also the health of evangelical free churches in Saskatchewan and Southern Alberta. And so when your churches may ask you as delegates or as leaders within your congregations, why does the Prairie District exist? Shouldn't they be doing this? Shouldn't they be doing that? The district exists to establish new churches, new evangelical free churches in Saskatchewan and Southern Alberta, but also to nurture the health of those churches. And so that's why we exist, and it is an exciting reason as to why we exist. And when we look at our next slide, there is the mission then. When we talk about mission, we know why we exist, but our mission as a district then, so in light of who we are, or in light of why we exist, what are we supposed to do? What does the district do? And some of this is in the veiled conversations, is like, well, we're giving them money what do they do for us? And we've tried to coalesce this around 3 specific statements. That the Prairie District fulfills its purpose by cultivating authentic relationships, by discerning healthy direction, and by resourcing churches and leaders. Our mission as a district are these 3 things. This is what we're trying to do. So right now, this is an action of our mission as a district in cultivating authentic relationships, that you would have these connections with each other, and we're distanced and masked and everything, but we're still gathering so that we can have these authentic relationships. We want authentic relationships to be a genuine part between all of our churches, and as they are part of our churches, they become a distinct part of our churches locally in our communities. That you would go back and you would promote and develop the idea of cultivating authentic, godly relationships that honor God in the working out. So when people see that, they say, there is something, just as Steve has said, these people love like Jesus. We want to, part of the district's mission is to discern healthy direction. We want to help you. I can think of numerous times throughout ministry where I come away from a key interaction or some sort of a meeting, and you sit back in your chair and it's, what am I supposed to do now? The church is in this kind of a situation. Now what are we supposed to do? Oh, pandemics come around. What are we supposed to do now? Now what? And discerning healthy directions for our churches, we want to help. As a district, the board wants to help, but additionally, this puts the onus back upon each and every member church within the district. You can help each other to discern healthy directions for your church, where you may experience perhaps some dysfunction or maybe a languishing within your own mission and ministry within your communities. You say, what am I supposed to do now? We can reach in the context of that healthy relationship, in the context of that authentic relationship, to discern what to do next. And part of, okay, now we know what we'd like to do. Do I have the tools to get there? So one of the things that the Prairie District is desiring to do as their mission is resourcing churches and leaders. This very conference, again, it's more than just cultivating authentic relationships and helping us discern healthy directions, but we're trying to provide you with resources so that you can work these things out on a very tangible way and in meaningful ways within your context of ministry. And so this is our mission. This is what we're trying to do. When people are asking, what does the district do? The district cultivates and discerns and resources. We're trying to develop in these ways, and this is the actions that we're doing, and we're doing them or trying to do them together. Leading us to our vision. So we know why we exist, and we know what we want to do. Where does that take us? Where do we go? And it leads us into our vision. Vision specifically states this is where we're heading. Our vision as a Prairie District is to see a healthy gospel-sharing church reaching every community of our district. And the alarm should go off, that's too much. It's too much, it's too big, and Rick Franklin, who was our consultant, talked about the idea of a God-sized vision, a vision that if you can accomplish it, if we can just accomplish it on a quick weekend where it's like, well, if we just put our heads together enough, it's just going to be done, and that'll be that. I genuinely believe that the Prairie District can have and see a gospel-sharing church reach every community of our district. It may not mean that we put an actual brick and mortar church within every single community of our district, but so many of our churches already relate to and have ministry into communities outside of themselves, and we want to recognize that. But we also want to be about church planting. We want to be establishing churches in new communities so that we can be having a gospel-sharing influence within all of the communities of our district. It's exciting. It's an exciting thing to be able to think about what this could look like. And then additionally, where are the partnership options? Maybe it's not feasible for us to place a church within a specific community, but are there others that we could be partnering with or encouraging in the resourcing of those churches? But our vision is to see a healthy gospel-sharing church reach every community of our district. It brings us to what we then value. How are we going to do these things? How will we go about fulfilling this good vision, the mission of cultivating and discerning and resourcing? We do this through five specific values. Biblical authority, that we are submitting ourselves, our thoughts, our actions, our ways to God's word. The Evangelical Free Church has always been noted as being people of the word. People of the book, where stands it written? We want to make sure that our attitudes, practices, habits, every part of our practice is submitted to God's biblical authority. But additionally, and I appreciated when someone shared this last evening, is that there is a dependence upon the Holy Spirit that has to be maintained. Relying on His enabling, His leading, as we pray and express the gifting that we've collectively been gathered with, and how the Spirit uniquely gifts each and every one of us. We lead into that. Again, in authentic relationships, we value authentic relationships where we are able to connect with others, encouraging the care and ministry partnership that we're striving towards. That we value outward mission. Seeing churches being sent to serve their broader communities and proclaim the gospel, and you should be able to see the connective tissue in the things that Steve and Neil have been sharing and what you've been talking about in your groups. This is something that is this outward mission, the desire to see the gospel go into the lives of people as we love each other like Jesus. And then qualified leadership. And this was a sticky one. Because when we did our initial analysis of who we are as a people, who we are as a district, and one of maybe the needs that we have, leadership came up, and the idea of qualified leadership. We want individuals who are developing we're developing and encouraging leaders that serve on the basis of biblical character, on the basis of theological training and emotional health. This doesn't mean that every single one of us, say, will go off into formal biblical education or Bible college training or seminary, but that we have theologically rich minds. And I'm thankful for the EFCC to provide things like the Theology Summit and the various seminars, all of the equipping that they provide. But additionally, that we're developing biblical character and emotional health within our pastors and our leaders in churches, so that the very things that we've described, the loving like Jesus, the transformational nature, the desire to go make disciples can take place. Purpose, mission, vision, and values. This is the fruit of what we've undergone as a board and trying to work out within the midst of all of the district churches for you, to serve you, to try and help and sharpen our focus as a district. So then what do you do with all that? If you look at the next slide, it really leads to the question then, so what's the plan in light of these strategic statements? It's nice to have some pie in the sky. Everyone loves pie. But now what? What are we supposed to do? Where is the ground level work? How do we set some goals? Well, based on our strategic planning, based on those strategic statements, there's some specific goals. We came up with 5 goals. And the other thing is that we're trying to dream. We're dreaming about what could the district look like in 20 years? What would it look like? How are we going to track along with having that gospel-sharing, healthy gospel-sharing church in every community of our district? What would that look like in 20 years? We can think even further, but sometimes it gets a little far out. So you say, well, what do we need to do in the meantime, in the immediate time? And so the board developed some specific goals that we aim to work out with from now, and part of it was in the months prior to this, so in about 18 months up until next conference, things that we want to encourage and look at. And each of these goals is directly tied to our mission. Each one is looking at how do we work out our mission in the midst of these goals. Our first goal was this: in light of the particular need, We need to hire a new district superintendent. We need to hire a district superintendent that was going to align with and be partner with the planning process that we've undertaken. And so this is the process that we went through. We reviewed the role description, and then we posted the position around seminaries. We received applications, presented the candidate to the district in September. We're on 1E right momentarily this afternoon, is we're going to have a vote on the candidate that God has provided for us. And then the follow-up goal to that will be seeing what the transition plan, because a person doesn't just move immediately and enter in. There's a transition that will happen in the midst of that. We look beyond that then. So, okay, once we hire a new district superintendent, what really is what do we need to do? How do we help our churches? Well, when we talk about cultivating relationships, when we talk about maybe things like alignment, when we talk about the need for resourcing and the need for discerning healthy directions, but when we also consider our E-free ethos, in essentials unity, non-essentials charity, but in all things Christ. We say, well, how are we doing in essentials unity? If you go to our next slide, what we want to do, we set the goal that we need to increase the number of credentialed pastors and ministry staff in our district by 25%. At the beginning of 2021, out of 73 ministry staff that we had within our district, these would be pastors, but other ministry staff that serve in churches, we had 33 who were not credentialed. 45% of our district staff were not credentialed. Credentialing is an important component of our congregational life. I say congregational life because it's our life within a district. It says that we're all trying to do the same things. We believe in the same goals. We believe in the same, that in essentials unity. And so we wanted to shore that up. So since then, 6 months later, in June 2021, we went from 45% who were uncredentialed to 36%. I'm thankful to Tim and to Bill, who are our interim district superintendents, that did a lot of work, and Tracy in the office, to try and help our pastors move along in this process. We want people to be committed to what it means to be an evangelical free church pastor or staff within the district. And so we'll continue this, and so our goal is to increase this again by 25%, or 19 pastors and staff by this same time next year. And we just had a new pastor's orientation in Three Hills, and that was very well attended, and so I feel like we're well on our way, but this is definitely a commitment that we want to see bring alignment into our district. Part of that, though, then it extends into our churches. And so our next goal was that we wanted to, there's a slide, I promise. There it is. That we want to increase the number of churches who've adopted the EFCC's 10-point statement of faith by 20% by this time next year. Some of you may say, that's a funny goal. Aren't we united in these essentials? At the point of developing this goal, and I believe this is still at this point, 19 of our 36 churches have not technically embraced the 10-point statement of faith that was revised by National in 2008. That means half of our Prairie District churches are not united in our essentials. It doesn't mean that we don't have agreement on things, and it doesn't mean that we've ceased to lack, I think, a great deal of charity with one another. And some of this may simply be because I don't know, why should I change to a 10-point statement of faith when the 12-point was serving us just fine, or whatever it is. But there was a significant amount of work that our national leadership went into to develop this, and very clear rationales. We've broken this down in that in the next year we want to do a lot of teaching and some notice on the rationale of the 10-point statement. Why was the change? Why did it happen? That our church reps and our district superintendents specifically engage churches who don't use the 10-point statement of faith. And then we would have a workshop on some governance documents. Sometimes it can be a matter of, well, now I need to change our church constitution or our church bylaws, and I'm not sure how to do that, or I don't have the will to do that, or I will face opposition in doing that. When we want to help you. As a board, we want to help everyone. We want us to be united in our essentials. And so this is something that we're trying to commit to do in the coming year. A fourth goal that we set out was that we wanted to take our next steps in the district church planting strategy. Clinton's going to share with us a little bit later on this afternoon during the AGM. But many of these things we've already been able to accomplish. The invitation to participate in a coaching group to prepare pastors and churches for the act of church planting. That's this group, the peer support group that you've been hearing about. And I'll show you at the end of this presentation just really, I'm just pointing you to Tracy's email address to say, Tracy, can you please point us in the right direction? Sorry, Tracy, this will be a lot of email maybe for you. Hopefully a lot of email. We want people to have participation with this group. We wanted to offer church planting and a discipleship workshop as the primary emphasis of our district conference. You're living this goal right now. We wanted you to have feel equipped in the area of disciple making and what that can mean for your church. And as you have an excitement and a desire to do disciple making, you say, well, why couldn't we do this in another community? Why couldn't we partner with another church or another couple churches and work something out together? And Clinton is going to be helping with that as the church planting catalyst on the board. And so then the final goal that we have is to establish a team of churches who are committed to planting. And this will be happening in the next year or so, that we want to see. We're legitimately serious about, we want to see God working in gospel-sharing churches that carry through the evangelical free church ethos and desire to be gospel-sharing churches. Finally, our fifth goal, and one that may seem a little blander, but we want to talk with you more. We want to increase communication and support with our district churches, and so trying to provide better methods of communication over the next, whether that's on a 1 to 3 month basis, so that you hear a little bit more from the board, that you can have a better sense of what it is that we're doing. I want to remind you that we send out the Prairie profile that gives you some updates on the district, but we want to try to do more for you. And if you have ideas about, well, this would really help, if we heard this from the district, this would really help our church understand more or buy in better, please let me know, or let anyone on the district board know. We would love to hear and talk with you more about that. The other thing is to establish an online community via agreed upon communication. As a board, we said, is there a way that we could be connecting maybe online, whether that's through an online forum? An email list is one thing for kind of a one-way and direct communication platform. But is there a way that we can be interacting? And our national leadership has established something called Basecamp. Well, they didn't make the platform. They embraced the platform called Basecamp, and they've extended this to many of our EFCC pastors. And so staff across the nation are part of this, and there's a large collection group. And I asked Brad, who's the communication catalyst, I said, can we just use this for ourselves? Absolutely. So what we've done, if you go to the next slide, is we have established now, we're going to establish 2 groups, one just for our Prairie District churches. And if you email Tracy and say, please put our church on the Basecamp group, what it will look like is you'll receive an email that will lead you to something that looks like this. And we've tried to make this as simple and as easy to work with as possible. I know the fatigue of trying to learn some new things, and especially in the technological realm, but it's pretty simple. We've got, if you go to the next slide, there's a message board where you can see any of the messages, where there's notices, there's updates, important information that we want you to share with you as churches. And this isn't the only way we'll communicate, but it's a more streamlined way that we want to stay networked with you as churches. The next slide shows that there's a place for documents and files, things like our the Prairie District bylaws, so that you can be refreshed. And it's like, this is how we operate as a district together. But even more than that, any kind of materials that we would be supplying to you and providing, we want that to be an option for you. And then additionally, there's some scheduled events. If there's events like the Prairie District Conference or other training events, maybe there's a local ministerial event that's happening within your area in Saskatchewan or Alberta or Calgary or somewhere, there's a way that you can see where there's some scheduled events. They may be Zoom events, places where you can receive resourcing and equipping for your church. This is just a hub. This is just, it's one tool that we want to just try and invite you into so that you can do that. There's also the pings option. When in doubt, you can You can ping me. If you go there and you start typing in Keith, you can get my name and you can ask me any question you want. I don't know if that's... And we'll shepherd you through the technological mailu or other questions whatever it is. You can additionally ping any other member. As we add churches and names, that's the way to do direct messaging within that. But this is a way that we're trying to develop and foster better communication, better relationships. I know we're spread out. So many of us, we have such a wide geographic area for our district, and this is a way that we can remain connected. This is how you can sign up. So Tracy's email is on our Prairie District website, and so if you're not sure, this is if you search on Google Prairie District Evangelical Free Church of Canada, you'll get this. And if you click the contact tab, you will see Tracy's email there, and she loves to hear from every one of you, and she even nodded in agreement. So that's good. Next slide, please. So where are we going? We are moving towards seeing healthy gospel-sharing churches reach every community of our district. That's really where we're going. And in so many ways, this next year is going to bring about kind of everyone getting back on the same page. That maybe we felt scattered, but there's very clearly a need, and we want our churches to be unified on those same things. We want our pastors to be credentialed and working at what it means to be an evangelical free church pastor. And then out of the context of this unity, we want to be loving like Jesus and making disciples and seeing where is God going to lead us into the future. So this is the fruit of our strategic planning, and I'll invite questions if you have any, or any feedback or anything like that. But as a board, we're genuinely encouraged, and we hope that you are too. And if there's things that you're like, can we get this or anything like that, just let me know. But if there are any questions before, we have one more segment to have a conversation with Trevor. But if there's any questions, we can do that now. It's COVID, George. That's dangerous work. You can't. All right. Again, we're grateful for your prayers. The board is always thankful for your prayers and the ways that you support. And I'm hopeful that this provides a way forward, a look forward. And in so many ways, where we're going is walking with our national leadership that's also trying to do the same kinds of actions. And it may look like a little different language, but talking with Bill Taylor yesterday as a board, it really feels like we're genuinely all moving towards the same goals and actions. And so we're grateful to be part of this larger family of churches, and thankful for your support. If there are questions, I deliberately wore an obnoxious sweater so that you could find me if you've got questions. So please don't hesitate to do so. And at this point then, I'm going to invite Trevor up to the platform. So as we discovered, there we go. That one's for you. So Trevor Brody is our candidate for the district superintendent. And again, this is, we're so grateful for God's provision to provide a candidate that we can be dialoguing with. And we will vote on Trevor's candidacy later this afternoon, but we wanted to have a time where you could hear a little bit of the process. And I know we outlined this in the package that we sent out, but we felt it would be perhaps helpful if you hear how we got to get together here at this point. And so I outlined some of the process, and just to fill out a few more details is that we received probably 9 viable applications when we put out our posting. And we were grateful for this. And then over the course of time, we, as a search team, we sent out some follow-up questions. ways that we would see, because sometimes when people apply, you're not sure, how articulate they are, how much they've just already pre-prepared. And so we sent out some follow-up questions to every candidate to see, can you provide us with some further answers in a timely manner, and a number of them did. At this point, some of them reconsidered and withdrew their own names. And after a bit more deliberation we made a smaller search team that was part of our district board. And the four of us, we came to a short list that we wanted to interview. And so we had two American candidates, and we didn't know how that was going to look and proceed. But then we also had two Canadian candidates, and we said, let's work with our Canadian candidates first. We would like somebody who is acquainted with our landscape, acquainted with our own Canadian culture, and so that was important. We interviewed Trevor. We also interviewed one other individual, and the search team, after that interview, and after a lot of prayer, a lot of consideration, unanimously recommended Trevor to our district board. We then did another meeting with Trevor, and after meeting with Trevor once again, a bit more questions, we also then again unanimously agreed that we would like to present Trevor as our candidate for the district superintendent. That was our process. Trevor, why don't you share a little bit about your journey as to how you've come to this stool now today?
Sure, can I borrow your stand?
Yeah, you sure can.
So I was asked to prepare our story of how we came to this place, and I had to write it down because I want to make sure I don't miss things. How we've been led to apply for this position and the process. I've been journaling throughout because we've been encountering God in unique ways for us that we haven't necessarily in the past. And I want to make sure I don't forget anything that the Lord's been teaching us through this, not just for us, but also, I think, for our children and others as well. So this is our story. I've shared this with our church in Smithers, with our district at our conference a couple weeks ago. I don't remember how much I've shared with you guys, so this might be new information even for your board at this time. So I want to actually back it up a bit, and through this storytelling that I'm going to give you, this is part testimony. This is part. I'm going to be vulnerable. I'm going to be honest with you, some of the struggles that we faced along the way as well. But it kind of goes back to this past spring, April and May. I was just taking some time to seek God's direction when it comes to pastoral ministry. And I have found that over, 16 years now of being in pastoral ministry, and I know talking to other pastors as well, there's seasons where you seek God. Am I still called to this? Am I still called to be pastoring? And I had kind of an intense time of prayer and a very clear answer from the Lord through that. Yes, I'm called to be a shepherd. And an affirmation, this is a lifelong calling. But also coming out of that time, more in May probably, June, seeking God in prayer, through fasting and in His Word, direction. God, just seeking you for direction right now. To be clear, we were not looking to leave Smithers. That wasn't the case. It was not at all, to be honest. We have deep, deep roots in Smithers. 3 of our 5 children were born there. We've raised our family there. In fact, Benita was born there, grew up there. I like to tell people, she gets tired of this, but she spent nearly 40 years of her life living within the same square mile. Home, school, work, all those things. So there's deep roots there. Her parents live there as well. I work very well with Pastor Dwayne, my colleague at the Smithers Free Church. We have for a number of years. But at the same time, as all that, just seeking God and trying to listen to His voice. One Saturday morning in May, I spent some significant time down by the river that flows through Smithers. I know a couple of you have camped there recently. There's a trail that runs around town, and there's a little trail off the trail and a little hidden spot that I went down, and I just prayed one morning and just seeking God, and I kept it to myself for the most part. But then one day soon after that, Benita out of the blue came up to me one day and said, if God ever called us to pastor somewhere else, I'd be open to that. I'd be open to that now. I wouldn't have been last year or a few months ago, but I'm open to that now. It's like, One day soon after that, Actually, I want to back up a bit. For a while at that point in life and ministry, I had been seeking the Lord. How do we need to take a step of faith? How are you calling us to step out in faith? And the reason for that is that even with COVID and before COVID, I've found that I can get pretty comfortable as an associate pastor. Pretty comfortable in the day-to-day routine, knowing what I'm going to do, choosing what I want to do, not doing things I don't really want to do. And there was one significant moment when our churches were shut down for 6 months. Sunday morning, a team of us would go and we would do a live stream service. And I was just sitting in one of the chairs during some of the songs, and I was thinking, this has gotten way too comfortable. This has gotten way too easy. Just come and doing a service, preaching to the empty chairs. And I don't like that. I didn't like the rut, and I despise when I find myself in a rut and just not going through the motions, not meaning good ministry is not happening, but it's just kind of the same, day in, day out, comfortable. I don't like that. And it was one day soon after that, it was June 17th, I was in my office. I had an appointment to meet with a young guy for some counseling/discipleship, but he canceled the appointment, so I found myself with kind of an open hour, free hour that I hadn't scheduled. And I was reading, so I had a new book, the new Tim Keller book on hope and the resurrection. I was just cracking it open. Here's some time. I wasn't expecting to get into it. Read a chapter. While I was reading the chapter, I heard the notification go off on my phone that I had an email, but I was going to finish the chapter first. I opened up the email, and it was from Terry Kaufman. And it was an invitation to consider applying for vacant or soon-to-be vacant DS positions within the Free Church. And I know that others received the same email with their own name on it. But Terry, if it's okay, I didn't ask you ahead of time, but can I read from that email? Do you mind if I quote you here? Okay. It says, "Hey, Trevor, I've been talking with several of our district leaders as they're active in their searches for new DS, and they've invited me to pursue or pass on leads of potential leadership candidates. So I've been processing names, and your name has surfaced. So I'm just reaching out to ask if you might be interested in any such conversations. I almost hesitate to raise this because I know the work you're doing where you are, but I also admit I have no idea how God might be moving in someone's life. Thus, I feel I need to ask the question and then step back and let you sort this out with God. Of course, even if you're willing to open this door a bit and look inside, there's no guarantees in any outcomes. I know you understand that. So there it is. If you want to talk further, let me know." And here's where I want to be perfectly vulnerable. My initial response, I was sitting in my office at my desk, and I have a chair next to the desk. As I got down on my knees, that's where I pray, and I wept. Just pray to God, I'm not qualified for this. I'm too weak. I lack education. I lack district board experience. I lack a lot of different things. I'm drastically insufficient for this. I'm just an associate pastor in a small northern church. And that was what I was praying and thinking. That's what I was pouring out to God in that time. So I spent time on my knees and I got back up on my chair, opened the book up to the next chapter. And at each chapter heading, Keller in that new book has a passage of scripture. And this is the passage that was at the start of the next chapter. 1 Corinthians 1, starting in verse 27. "But God chose what is foolish in the world to shame the wise. God chose what is weak in the world to shame the strong. God chose what is low and despised in the world, even things that are not, to bring to nothing things that are, so that no human being might boast in the presence of God. And because of him, you are in Christ Jesus, who became to us wisdom from God, righteousness and sanctification and redemption, so that, as it is written, let the one who boasts, boast in the Lord." And I was completely overwhelmed. I reached out to Terry the next day to set up a Zoom conversation the following week. So by that was Friday. I take Fridays off in pastoral ministry. I've always taken Fridays off. Just is a day that works. So I had kind of completed my sermon by Thursday before that email came. It sat Thursday, it sat Friday. Saturday I go back in, I go over the sermon again. And I was reviewing the sermon, And it was a Father's Day sermon. It was Father's Day. It was preaching on Mark chapter 9. It's called the sermon, A Desperate Dad Finds the Deliverer. It's the story, it's one of my favorite stories in the Gospels of the dad with the demon-possessed boy who goes to the disciples and they can't deliver the son. And then Jesus comes down from the mountain and asks what's going on, and the big kerfuffle because they can't figure out what to do. And the father says to Jesus, if you can do anything, help my son. And she says, if you can, anything is possible for him who believes. And then the father's response, I believe. Help me overcome my unbelief. And I was reviewing my sermon when these words, and I had quoted another author in the sermon, and I just was reading these words. And again, I hadn't looked at the sermon since before that email, but the words just hit me. And I can't even remember who these words are from, but it goes like this. True faith is always aware how small and inadequate it is. The Father becomes a believer not when he amasses a sufficient amount of faith, but when he risks everything on what little faith he has. And he yields his insufficiency to the true sufficiency of Jesus. True faith is unconditional openness to God, a decision in the face of all to the contrary that Jesus is able. And to be vulnerable again, I stopped and I wept again. You're going to learn that I'm an emotional guy. I hadn't realized that I had included those words in my sermon for other people, not for me. But God was pointing them at me. We were being called to a step of faith, unconditional openness to God and what he might want to do. So in our discussion with Terry that next week, Terry really actually doesn't know me very well. We've met a couple times at some meetings and that. I told him I had to make full disclosure to him about my lack of qualifications and lack of experience and lack of education. And Terry gave me the encouragement, I'll never forget this, to tap on the door. Just tap on the door and see how God leads. See what happens. It may not go anywhere. It may go somewhere. It may close. It may open. But I'm going to learn from God through this process, if nothing else. So a couple of clear taps that in our conversation that came out. And the first clear tap that I needed to make, one was that Terry offered to contact and reach out to you, Keith, and also to the district chair of APD, and to see if my lack of a master's degree was a deal breaker. If that was going to be, okay, no, sorry. It wasn't. The next step was for me to have lunch with my church board chairman back in Smithers and seek his counsel and his opinion. He is a close friend of mine. We've walked through, we've walked through a lot together, and I can trust him, to be honest. And part of the reason I'm emotional right now is that 2 days ago, I found out that he actually fell off a roof and broke his pelvis and his hip and has had emergency surgery. So that's stuff that's happening back home right now. But anyway, we sat down for lunch, and what I expected him to say, his name is Brent, what I expected Brent to say was, pat me on the back and say, oh, nice to be asked, but I don't see you in that role. That's what I was expecting, and to be honest, might have been what I was hoping. But what he actually said is that he was excited for me and affirmed and strongly encouraged me to take the step to apply. That he saw that I had skills and gifts that needed a bigger role in order to blossom. That was the expression he used. And I was blown away. I don't think I cried, and I did cry that time too. In the next few weeks, we kept seeking God's word and the counsel of the Holy Spirit and his people. We kept hearing the same message from people who didn't know what others had been saying. And this was really affirming for us. We continued to be encouraged by others to take the step and keep knocking and keep tapping on the door and keep walking through one more step every time it opened wider. And looking back, I wrote down prayer requests in this journey. And my prayer request was, God, please teach us what we need to learn through this. Grow us through this. Don't let pride or selfish ambition get in the way here. Certain passages of Scripture became prominent. Psalm 37, 23, 24, the Lord directs the steps of the godly. He delights in every detail of their lives. Though they stumble, they will never fall, for the Lord holds them by the hand. Psalm 27, verse 14, wait patiently for the Lord. Be brave and courageous. Yes, wait patiently for the Lord. And so July 23rd, we applied for the DS positions in APD and PD. The previous 5 weeks, we had come to the conclusion that this was a step of faith God was calling us to take, and it was also a step of obedience that God was calling us to take. The ensuing weeks, we had further communication with the board, the list of 8 questions that we responded to at the end of July there, an interview with the search committee in August. We were actually down in Vancouver on holidays, but I was amazed by just the peace during the interviews. I actually didn't get nervous. I don't get that. I wanted to be completely upfront and honest in the interviews. I wasn't going to try to be someone I wasn't or pretend that I had qualifications I didn't have. And to be honest, I actually really enjoyed the interview. I actually thought it was actually a lot of fun. And for Benita, I'm not sure she thought it was fun as she tried to listen at the door. But I also saw that during our conversations that there's a lot of meshing kind of where I'm at and where the district is at. It's like, wow. And looking back on things that, God's actually prepared me for some of this kind of stuff through things I've been involved with and experiences that we've had. And so the doors just kept opening wider. September 1st, I was journaling again what I was learning through this. I'm learning I'm weaker than I thought. I'm learning that I don't have as much faith or courage as I thought I did. And my prayer, though, that I wrote out to God that day was, don't just teach me about my weaknesses and flaws through this. Teach me about your power and your strength and your glory through this as well. We had the interview on September 2nd. Benita got to be a part of that for a little while. She told me, don't tell that story, so I won't. If you want to hear it, you can ask her. Let her tell that story. And I was asked to let my name be presented as the candidate here. And we had a few days to pray and process through that and to talk through that. And as I told our church back home, this is the toughest decision I've ever made in my life. No doubt. This is the hardest decision. I didn't seek this out. It wasn't a goal. I wasn't looking to get out of Smithers. We have deep roots there, like I said. We weren't looking to leave. I just feel like God has brought this to us. That weekend I had really helpful conversations on the phone with Tim and with Rob as well. I know Rob back from his CPD days when he was in Kamloops and I was in Ashcroft. We probably actually, though, didn't need the amount of days that I'd asked for. The door kept opening wider. We knew we had to keep taking the next steps of faith and obedience to how God was leading. So on September 7th, I said yes to Keith and let my name stand. And from that time on, we've had a peace that passes understanding. Benita's had that as well. Even our youngest son, Isaac, has expressed that too. That's been one of the encouraging things for our boys to see in our boys. As we told them, our kids have known right off the bat of what's happening. We've encouraged them to pray and seek God. And we told them, you know what, you can pray and ask God for it not to happen. But pray, seek him. And through that time, especially our youngest son, we've been encouraged in just seeing how he's engaged with the Lord in prayer and that he's turned to Scripture in this time as well. I told our board in Smithers on September 11th. We told our church at the end of the service on September 12th. And one last thing here, something that's been very clear for me, and I shared this with our board and with our church in Smithers, is that, as a pastor, I am regularly calling our people to take steps of faith and obedience to God. And this time, God was calling this pastor to do the same thing. And so that's our story, how we got here. In sharing this, I do want to recognize, though, I'm not trying to manipulate anything in sharing our story. I think there's a danger in pastoral leadership or church leadership for someone to say, I heard from God, I had a vision from God, and then they use it to manipulate, or they can use it to manipulate. That's not my goal here. I just want to share with you what God has been teaching us and how he's been leading us, and trust that the Holy Spirit is going to continue to lead Prairie District as you vote this afternoon, and then moving forward as well.
Thank you, Trevor. Thank you for sharing that. It's encouraging. It's always encouraging to hear the stories of people as they submit themselves to God and to see where he will lead. And so thank you for sharing that. It's been a joy to get to know Trevor and Benita through the interview, and we're so grateful as a board to be able to share Trevor with our district and seeking the Lord's will throughout the day. We wanted to have a time where you can ask some questions. Some people did text bomb Tim's phone, so yeah. It's only 2 questions. I guess it's more of a pop than a bomb. But And so after a couple questions, if you can be considering, we'll extend the opportunity if you have a question for Trevor to ask to come to one of the side mics. And if you just don't mind, we do have people tuning in via Zoom, and so if you can kind of present yourself somewhat towards one of the cameras, and that would be helpful. It just helps them at home feel included as well. So. Trevor, the one question that was asked is our EFC Prairie District covers a large geographic area, and so what is your strategy to keep in contact with the pastors and churches?
Yeah, so I think that's actually a question that came up in the interview, if I remember correctly. Obviously, these days, Zoom has become an important tool. That's a tool, phone calls as well, and I recognize that that's a part, but I also recognize that's not as good as face-to-face. And my intention, my goal, Lord willing, would be to be in the churches. Obviously can't be in every church on a Sunday morning, but through the week as well, as much as possible. I want to get to know the pastors, lead pastors, and I shared this within the interview as well. I want to get to know associate pastors and youth pastors. I want to meet your lay leaders. I believe that an important role is to build relationships, healthy relationships with pastors and also staffs and also lay people. Pastors don't tend to stay in churches as long as their lay people do. I recognize that, especially in rural small towns. There are people and families who are there for a long, long, long time. And my goal is to build relationships by meeting in person, whether it's weeknights, as far as possible, Sunday mornings. Maybe there's an opportunity to Zoom in to local church board meetings as a DS, and just even for part of the meeting, just to connect that way too. But I want to be in the churches. I expect to be on the road. And I'm open to that. I've always loved a road trip. I love road trips. So the driving and the traveling does not intimidate me. I actually enjoy that. So.
The second question says that, do you have any church conflict experience? Some of our churches may need help, and so I guess the question would be around how, what would be your plan or strategy around helping church conflict?
Other than within the churches where I've served, I don't have experience helping or working with other churches in conflict. What I think I do bring to the table, there's kind of two parts. First of all, is I have worked with a lot of people in conflict, and church conflict is people in conflict. And so my approach is to listen and ask questions and understand as best as I can the situation from different perspectives, where people are coming from. I've been told that I ask hard questions, and I'm not afraid to ask hard questions. And probably, even in our culture today, not afraid to maybe make people uncomfortable at times with hard questions. I'm okay with that. So I'm not afraid of that. The other piece of answering that question would be, though, is I don't see myself as going in as a solo guy. Here I am to help solve your conflict. I want to work as a team with the board and other leaders in churches to go in as a team of whatever, 2, 3, whatever it can be, to help. Again, same approach, listening, understanding. Is there something that needs to be repented of? Is there something that needs to be forgiven? And working through those processes as a team.
I'll just add to that, one of the great qualities that in our conversations with Trevor that came out consistently time and again was his commitment to teamwork, to partnering with the board. Trevor indicated that he wasn't going to just, Lone Ranger style walk into our churches and just try to exercise some sense of will, that there was very much a deliberative and a commitment to being part of the team with the board, but also being part of the team with the church in trying to sort out whatever matters, discerning those healthy directions and how to go about doing that. So we very much appreciated that about Trevor.
And if I could add to my answer as well, just I have seen over and over again through my life and ministry and family the importance of prayer. And I regret not mentioning that a minute ago, is that's listening, but also praying and seeking the Lord's will. And that's a commitment I have as on my own, to be praying, but also to be praying with you and to be praying in the midst of conflict and seeking the Lord's work, the Spirit's work to change hearts. Prayer is vital. And I see nodding heads, and you know that. But I don't want to just talk about praying, but actually pray. I also recognize, that's what, there's a lot of areas where I don't have experience, and I'm going to be learning and growing into this position. I won't be starting knowing how to do the job. I'm going to be learning and growing as I go. And I want to learn. I want to grow.
So we have the opportunity now, if you have questions for Trevor, to come to one of the side mics. If you're listening in from home via Zoom, if you can text your question to 403-819-0671, and Tim will be your mouthpiece in this particular instance. So if you have any questions, now is your time.
Hi, Trevor. I'm Jason. I'm so thankful to hear your story, share your vulnerability. I'm so connected with you. I would like to ask, what's your will on female ordination?
Sorry,
I want to ask, what's your will on female ordination?
What's my
Your will, your own will.
view on female ordination?
Yes.
Are we allowed to talk about that until 2024?
I'm going to call a flag on that one. I'm just, only in part because this is, I think, an ongoing matter of conversation with our association. And so, unless you would like to answer a little bit, but it is something that, how about this? Trevor's answer doesn't represent the views of the district or national. These are...
Okay. No, I don't mind.
But it's good to have, yes.
I don't mind tackling that question. Serving on MSC, it's something that pops up. So currently, right now, a female can be credentialed with the Free Church of Canada. That's the first step of the process. They can be credentialed, recognize ministry giftings, abilities. Part of the question requires an answer, and is how do you define or understand ordination? And so, for me to answer that question, I'll answer how I understand ordination. It may not be how you're understanding ordination, and that's part of the goal and part of the challenge we have as a free church over the next few years is to come to a place where we're on the same page as to what does ordination actually mean. If we look at ordination in a traditional, historic way of someone who's gone through other denominations a certain way where they get the education, and then once they have the education, they're ordained and then can go serve in any of the churches in the denomination. That's not how it's worked in the Free Church. In the Free Church, we see ordination as something that starts from the ground up in the local church, that asks that their pastor be ordained because they're affirming the gifts and callings. The paperwork that happens, the review, the ordination council, making sure that this person is in alignment with us doctrinally, in essentials unity, also in alignment with us with regard to our ethos, our character and calling. And so that's kind of the process that's happening. If we see ordination as the local church affirming this person's gifts and calling, and the national also affirming this person's gifts and calling to ministry, for their ministry in that local church, in their context, then I think, personally, I would have an openness to that. If we understand ordination as giving someone the authority to go into any church they want, any role they want, well, that's not what ordination is in the Free Church. That's my personal opinion. It does not represent the views of the Prairie District, the MSC, or the National. And that being said, I'm studying and I'm reading through a lot of stuff right now with different views on that. And I'm learning, and I want to learn. And as I always tell the Lord, correct me where I'm wrong on things. But also affirm where maybe I have the right idea on things. I want to learn and grow, and I'm definitely open to conversation on that.
Thanks, Trevor. And I think that's a commitment all our leadership has in this particular area, so thank you for that.
Now for something completely different. You still have kids at home. grade 10 and 12. If this happens, how do you see that transition taking place for somebody in grade 12? The potential of moving halfway through the year is pretty traumatic, potentially. So how do you see this transition happening for your family?
This has been part of our conversation with the district board as well. The idea that if there is a yes vote, I'd be finished in Smithers December 31st, starting in the new role in January. I think one of the words is a soft start, perhaps doing some work from Smithers initially, with the idea of being fully moved into the district for July 1st. That would enable our son to finish his grade 12 year, Benita to finish her contract. She works as an education assistant in a local elementary school. Also allow our younger guy to finish his grade 10 year. What we talked about a bit yesterday, and there's moving parts in this, and a lot of this needs to be determined yet, but again, Zoom and phone calls are good tools, but I would want to be out here and on the road in those first number of months, getting out to churches and meeting people, and perhaps maybe for a few weeks here and then back home for a couple weeks, then back out here for a few weeks, that kind of transitional. As we have a home to sell in Smithers, we would need to buy one here as well. I want to be able to go to my son's grad. I want to be able to, my boys are both basketball players, and I'd love to be able to go to their zones, especially grade 12 on the senior team. And our younger son's a pretty important player on his junior team. So I don't want to just leave the family for 6 months until they come. I want to be back and forth a bit. And that's going to be a struggle. It's going to be hard being away from Benita and the kids. But that's kind of the ideas we're looking at, is looking at that back and forth a bit with the goal of landing end of June, early July. Again, looking at the market in Smithers is pretty hot these days. Not sure what it's like here exactly, but yeah, that's moving parts. We're open to God's leading on that, definitely, but that's kind of what we're thinking right now.
For perspective too, the Prairie District bylaws allow for a window of time up to 9 months from the time the new district superintendent is voted on, recognizing that there's transition. This is a significant role and always significant circumstances. And so the board's been in regular dialogue with Trevor. We've tried to do our best, but if the vote is affirmative, be assured as of January 1st, there is a new district superintendent who will be available and planning and working out how to serve the district, and working also with Tim and Bill, our interim district superintendents. There will be it's not that they'll fall off the earth. They're going to continue to be around as long as possible.
But that's actually something that I asked him in our phone conversation, is if he'd be willing to mentor me. I want to learn. I need to learn. And Bill, I don't know you as well, but as well, when I want to learn from you. You guys have the long-term relationships here, and I don't have that. I know there's others in the district as well, other leaders who maybe not in pastoral or board ministry right now, but I want to learn from them as well, and hope that they'd be willing to invest in the new guy a bit.
Hi, Trevor. I'm Marco Chen from the South Calgary Chinese E3. And so during the workshop, you mentioned about your vision of multi-generations and cross-generations ministry. And today, during this conference, I hear, like Jamie mentioned about foreigner. I'm a foreigner with a Canadian passport. And this morning, when I have breakfast, I meet Americans with Canadian passport like Daryl and Molly there. So I want to hear a little bit about your vision, multicultural, and if you will be the DS, and then how you embrace this multicultural environment. During the orientation, I heard that, like Bill mentioned about in Ontario, actually there's a new big Canadian church, right? Kind of like joined the EFCC family. So I want to listen a little bit about your vision regarding multicultural and cross-cultural. Thank you.
Okay. I don't know how to share. I'm sure I have a vision. I look at John's vision in Revelation, and I see that there's people from every ethnicity and tribe and color and language gathered around the throne of God and worshiping Him. And I love the fact that the Free Church has a part of that in some of our areas. So I embrace that wholeheartedly. Where we have lived and ministered tend to be places where we don't have as much diversity. I would not. I don't know how to answer that. I'm excited to visit the church First Free in Calgary tomorrow. I've heard the story a few years ago. Actually, I don't know if you maybe had lunch with you guys and heard your story. And I don't know how to answer that other than the fact that being in this role and being able to get to know people in different ethnic background churches really excites me. I want to learn and grow. I want to meet and I want to fellowship with believers from different backgrounds than mine. I grew up in Langley. I went to school at UBC, so multiculturalism is certainly part of my background. Again, living in some small towns, we haven't had that kind of openness, but I see the Free Church as being uniquely positioned to welcome in people from not just different denominational backgrounds, but different cultures in different places around the world. We have an ethos that welcomes people based on our essentials, which is our statement of faith. And so I open arms, I guess, that's my vision, open arms to different backgrounds, different ethnicities, languages, and so on. And saying that, one of the things in our context in Smithers is that we have a number of First Nations people, Indigenous people in our area, and particularly a couple families in our church as well. And seeing that the church, the capital C church, and also seeing that the Free Church, this is a growth opportunity for us to learn how to better relate to our Indigenous neighbors and also brothers and sisters. So I would like to see us be, part of my vision would be a people who are not just token saying the right things, but actually on the ground doing the right things to welcome. As we drive through Calgary, as we go visit down at the Lower Mainland, I grew up in Langley, moved away from the Lower Mainland in 1999, and when I go back every year, I notice, wow, things have changed in the Lower Mainland, and I assume it's the same in Calgary, and I assume it's the same in a lot of the cities in this district, where the world's coming to us. And again, as the Free Church, let's have open doors. Let's have open doors. Our unity is in Christ, not in our language, not in our home country. Our unity is in Christ, and let's live that out. I hope that captures a bit of what you're looking for, and yeah.
I just want to tell you, and Rob Cave would agree with this too, you haven't lived until you've gone to the South Calgary Church on a joint service, preached in English and had it translated into Mandarin and Cantonese, and heard thousands of other believers singing. I'm sure I heard it in Chinese when I was singing at the church. It's just that little glimpse of what's going to be like in the future as we gather from all over the world. The only problem I would warn Trevor about, some of the translators say a lot more than you do as the preacher, so be careful.
Other questions for Trevor?
I actually want to add to my last one. I was just thinking some more. Sorry, I'm not always the quickest on my feet thinking, but one of the things that I found very helpful in Smithers, again, that I would look to see how God leads here is that, I've mentioned we have a couple of First Nations families in our church, but we need to get better at listening to their stories. Not just First Nations, but other people's stories. So what are your experience with institutional racism? What is your experience growing up in a town where there's that kind of bias, and hearing him tell the story. He's a guy he's married, he's got a couple of young daughters, he works at the mill, driving home from the mill after afternoon shift, he's coming home at 11:30, Everyone's pulling out onto the highway, driving home. He does that as well. He gets pulled over. Why does he get pulled over and no one else? We need to hear the stories and understand what others face. He loves Jesus. He's raising his daughters to love Jesus as well. We need to understand the struggles that he has because we don't get it. We just don't get it. We have another family in our church where the lady is from Smithers, and she married a guy from Chad when she was doing mission work in Senegal. And so they have four children. And during the Black Lives protest and movement stuff that was happening summer 2020, we just had them over one day. Tell us your experiences. How have you experienced racism in Smithers? We need to understand. We need to hear. And I've also, and I guess I extend this as well. I am going to fail, and I'm going to say things that are insensitive and wrong at times because I'm ignorant in a lot of ways. And if I ever say something to a black person or to a First Nations person that is ignorant or disrespectful or racist, call me on it. I need to know because I'm not always aware of it. And I guess I would expand that in ministry. If I'm saying something or doing something that's inappropriate or comes across wrong, call me on it. I want to grow. I want to learn. I need to know that. I'm going to fail in ways. I'm not coming because I'm 10 out of 10 here. Not at all. I want to learn and grow. I want to learn. I want to listen. I want to listen to your story.
Thank you, Trevor. Other questions?
This is a kind of a combination question, both for Trevor and the district board, and that is the vision of seeing churches viable or ministry into every community in our district. How do you see that working? I mean, some communities maybe have struggling works, but they're not EFC. How do you see us working with other denominations, or maybe that isn't in the vision, but in terms of reaching our the area that we're in?
Thank you for the question. So just so part of this too is the Evangelical Free Church was really rooted in this idea of openness and of trying to work together with different traditions. And so the first part of our vision is to continue fostering out our church planting strategy that Clinton laid out, I believe last year at conference, and evaluating where are the communities that would be viable, where there is perhaps an evangelical presence that is not present. They need the gospel within their community, and so we want to evaluate that. But additionally, then maybe there's places where, look, there's a church in those communities that maybe could be partnered with or something. Maybe they're struggling. Maybe it's a challenge. I know that the Parkland district, there's one instance where they planted a church out of the building of a different church that had arrived to the conclusion that now is the time to hang up their hats. I think we're open to creativity. We're open to seeing what that can look like, but we want there to be an evangelical free presence within our communities, but we're also not stuck. Like it has to be this or nothing. We want to see where can we support works as well. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
And just to add to that, it's about the kingdom of Jesus, not about the free church kingdom. And so there's an openness to work with other like-minded, kingdom-minded people and groups, organizations, churches that are seeking to fulfill the Great Commission and obey the Great Commands.
Thanks, Trevor, for making yourself available for this. My name's Lawrence. I'm in Osler. No one knows where that is, right? Trevor, Marcy and I just moved here from British Columbia grew up in Saskatchewan, but when we were in BC, it's very different. Felt like you need a passport to live there. I'm happy to be back in the prairies. What are your feelings on prairie people? Because they're very different, right? And I'm not trying to trap you. I'm just saying, I know there's rednecks in Smithers, but prairie people are a little bit different, right? So are you feeling okay about moving into a different location and working with a different kind of people?
Yes. No. It's funny, you know, people back home. What have I been told? I've been told, I've been asked if I'm going to get a truck. I've been asked if I was going to start cheering for the Calgary Flames, and that's a hard no. The only time I'll ever cheer for the Calgary Flames is if they're playing a team that it's advantageous for the Vancouver Canucks that other team lose, okay? So that's a non-negotiable. At our district conference a couple weeks ago, I was wearing short sleeves, and one of the guys came up to me and said, "Oh, you got lots of room for tattoos." So, moving to Alberta too. We have a diversity in Smithers. Smithers is a rural town. Smithers is unique for a northern rural town in that we have everything in Smithers with regard to industry, blue collar, white collar work, everything. So I relate well. I feel I relate well to people from all different backgrounds. Again, how did someone in our board meeting define redneck? Glenn, how did you define it? It was something along the line of don't like being. Yeah, okay, and yeah, is that fairly? You agree with that? Is that good? Don't like being told what to do. Just kind of top down, resisting that. Don't tell me what to do. I think I see that in Smithers too. How would I approach that? Well, I want to build relationships and I want to build trust. I'm not the district superintendent coming and telling people what to do. I want to build a relationship. I want to learn and serve and resource. That's what I see. But when it comes down to it, whether someone is a redneck or not, or whatever culture or subculture or subculture, recognizing that not every small town in Alberta is the same either. Not every small town in Saskatchewan is the same either. But we're called to embrace and submit to the Lordship of Jesus Christ. And so what does that look like in our life? What does it look like in our church? What does it look like in our family? What does it look like in our life? And that's what I come back to. What is Jesus calling us to do? What does obedience to Jesus look like right now? Because no matter what issue we're facing, there is no context in which the commands of Jesus don't apply. There are no exemption clauses when it comes to the Lordship of Christ. In this area, we don't have to obey Jesus because this is happening. It doesn't exist. And so our challenge as believers, whether we're Free Church or whatever denomination or movement, is what does it look like to obey Jesus right now? In my life, am I exhibiting the fruit of the flesh or the fruit of the Spirit? Because that's telltale. If I'm exhibiting the fruit of the flesh, then I'm not walking in alignment with Jesus or with the Spirit. And so that's what I'm going to come back to. What does Jesus command? Am I walking in the Spirit or in the flesh? I know I apologize. I don't remember what I've told everyone. I'm not totally foreign to the prairies. I've never lived here. I've never lived outside of BC. But part of our summer holidays every year as a child was 2 weeks in Saskatchewan at Grandma Grandpa's farm, just outside of Moose Jaw, near Tuxford. Buffalo Pound Lake was where we fished and canoed and swam, and cousins in Saskatoon. And then once we had a family, week every year, driving out to Moose Jaw. We got really tired of the Calgary to Moose Jaw drive. But I've always had a soft spot for the prairies and the people. I enjoy the big sky. I enjoy coming from Vancouver area, I enjoy the slower pace. I enjoy the intense importance of relationships. One of my kind of personal ministry slogans is people over projects. I want to get to know people and spend time with people. And if that's at a coffee shop, if that's in a phone call, if that's helping out in any way I can with what they're doing, just want to embrace that. Hope that answers a bit, Lawrence.
Hey, Trevor, let's talk about technology. And we are very thankful that we have this conference in Okoto's E3. We, have multiple cameras and then very good sound systems. And you also mentioned about Zoom. So we have 36 churches in the district, right? Not every churches have the same resource. So if you will be the DS, and then do you have any plan or strategy that can help out some churches with less resource but want to adopt the changes and technology-wise, equipment-wise, how to adopt this new kind of environment of ministry and pastoring? Yes, that's my question.
In addressing that question, I first want to say it's not just about what the DS can do, it's about the board. And so it's working together with the board, and part of the strategy is resourcing churches. So whether, I know there's a line item in the budget for financial help, there are people in our churches with technological abilities that maybe they can help out in other churches. Maybe they can be spared for a week to go and help out. I know Brad Jarvis at Home Office has helped us out in Smithers a bit too as a resource and pointing us in directions and what kind of camera should we buy, those kinds of things. So more connecting, resourcing. I'm not the guy who's going to come in and be able to tell you how to do it. We have a guy in our church who's that guy, and I'm not that guy. I really am not that guy. But resourcing and trying to connect that way is how I would see it. Again, not just me, but through the district. Again, the district and you have relationships with each other that I don't have with you yet. You know each other's skills and abilities and giftings and who the go-to guy is or the go-to girl is for those things. And I want to learn and grow and be a part of that process.
I'd just echo what Trevor said in regards to that need for resourcing. If you know churches or your own church is in a particular place where it's like we're really struggling here in this area or that, maybe it's technology, maybe it's something else. The board wants to hear. We want to be with you. When in doubt, email Tracy. That'll be the theme of this conference. And we'll find ways. Like there are ways to work around this. We want to help and want to serve every church. So yeah. Any other questions? We got about 5 more minutes before lunch.
I got a question. More for the board than you. Well, maybe your opinion too. In one of the conversations today, and I'm not gonna say who suggested it, but district guy sounds a lot better than district superintendent, and I kind of like that too. So just be the district guy. I say that half jokingly.
Yeah, non-essentials charity. So that's lots of charity. All right. We feel free to adopt your own local vernacular as well. That is flexibility. Well, thank you all for participating, for giving Trevor some time to share his heart, and we are excited. So at the AGM at 2, we do have a slight adjustment to the agenda, is that we'd like to actually work through the motion surrounding Trevor's invitation to serve as the district superintendent almost right away before all the reports. So just there will be that one change, but we'll go through that as we get to the meeting and make an amendment to the agenda. But just be aware of that. Again, if you're tuning in from home, thank you for participating. But I believe, look, we're 5 minutes early. You can stretch your legs in the parking lot or whatever, but I think Tim had a couple announcements, and then we'll be wrapped up.
Two quick clarifications. Yes, get a Ford 150. Oh, it'll ramp your ministry way up, Trevor. But I learned that from Hugh Fraser, who did a number of transitional ministries for us, and he was living in Calgary, drove down the Foremost to work with him, and he had a brand new truck, and he could hardly get the board in the church because they all wanted to walk around his truck and touch it and look at what it had. So, and if you have any technical problems, call my grandkids. They'll help you. They're experts. Tracy, can you stand for a moment? I haven't introduced you. Everybody hears from Tracy Morris. Thank you for all that you do. She loves prompt responses to all of her communications, so pick up the pace. I'm not going to use any names, but when we communicate, let us hear from you. And Tracy has done a ton of work as far as our conference going here. Lori Dreger from our church office here has coordinated all the meals with incredible teams that have come in, and these great tech guys. Hey, call these guys. They know all about the tech stuff. They'll help you out. We had an amazing tech team that some of our guys, Roger and Richard and Michael, lead from our church, and so we're blessed with that. And they've given a lot of time. And Dwight, thanks for the soundboard and all that. It takes people to put a conference on when you're doing the Zoom and the live stream and everything that's taking place. So we're very grateful for those who've put in the time. We all have those people that really make it happen. If you have some kind of a dot, mine's yellow. That's okay? Okay. Yeah, you're purple. You means you're a delegate. If you don't have a dot on there or haven't checked with Tracy yet, just because when the voting comes, we want to recognize some of you come just as guests, but we want you to be able to be a participant with that if you want to do that. The conference booklets, we've put them out like one per couple. But if you're that couple, you don't want to share a booklet, you want your very own, let us know. We can get you an extra one. If you don't want your husband or your wife touching your booklet, writing notes in it, we can help you out. We can help your marriage. So let us know. We'd be glad to do that. We found out at break, unless you give very specific instructions, people, I don't think they ever got to the fireside room for our break, and so you have to eat the muffins for lunch now. So we're going to take a break for lunch. 1 o'clock, we'll finish our last session. 2, we're going to go right into our AGM and try to move through our agenda. The printed reports are there. We depend on you reading them and absorbing them so that you have the information, so we can move quicker through business meetings. Everybody loves that when you move quicker through business meetings. That depends on our absorption of the material that's down there. Thanks for all of you who have sent the reports in, and hopefully that's encouraging to you. And you can take some of that back. Find something in there that you can share in your own congregation as a blessing. Hey, we heard about this, or we read about this. The wider church family is a marvelous blessing. And I think Trevor and Bonita, should God call them here, we'll find out that you are even more blessed when you travel around and visit 25 or 30 churches, because you see God doing different things than in just one place. And it's uplifting. Lynn and I have experienced that, and I'm sure Rob and Sharice did as well. All right, so same instructions out to the fireside room, Tracy, as far as meals. And I'm not going to dismiss your tables. You aggressive people, you type A's, you just go. The rest of us will just kind of wander out there and we'll get our lunch. So let's pray and we'll eat together. Father, thank you for all of those who've assisted us in our conference, given hours to be with us, because it's kingdom work, it's Jesus' work. Thanks for those who've prepared another meal for us. We really, really, really need it. And so we'll eat it. Thanks for your blessing in that way. We receive it in Christ. Amen. So type A's, get going.